All right. So what we have on the agenda for today is I want to talk about Excel Chapter 2. So we're going to talk about formulas and functions and some of the really fun things that we can do with formulas and functions in Excel. My favorite set of functions are the date functions. So one of the things that I'm going to do is I'm going to go a little bit off book for a little bit today and talk about one of my all-time favorite things to do in Excel, which is a little thing that I like to call Fun with Dates. The booklet that I created for you that's in your Canvas is called Using Excel to Calculate Someone or Something's Age. So we'll talk about that. Another one of my all-time favorite things to do in Excel is to create pop-up text. So I'll show you how to create pop-up text in Excel. So that's when you are moving around in Excel. Sometimes there'll be little messages that will just pop up. Well, I'm going to show you how to make those. And then we'll also do, of course, the Hypermass online storage salary report, which is what the actual assignment is all about. Another one of my favorite things that we'll talk about today is conditional formatting. Conditional formatting is great, and we'll talk about that. And I'll show you not only the conditional formatting that the book is talking about, but why you might want to use this in real life and how I actually use this in real life and that kind of stuff. Because conditional formatting actually, I think, is one of the most useful things that you can do in all of Excel. So that's kind of the plan for what we're going to do today. Are there any questions about really anything at all that we've been talking about over the past couple of days, past week and a half worth of stuff? Global questions before we get started? All righty. So what we are doing in your booklet, if on page 67 is actually the thing that we are going to be creating today. So we're going to be creating the Hypermass online storage report. And a big chunk of what we are going to do is at the bottom of page 67. So one of the things that I will have us do is we're going to be creating a number of formulas. And the way the book talks about creating the formulas is not wrong, but I find that the way that they actually go about doing it is kind of confusing. And so when we get to that point, we will probably also go a little bit off book, and then I'll talk about what we're actually doing and why we're actually doing it, and all of that kind of stuff. So basically, what our plan is if you look at Figure 2-1 on page 67, that is the salary report that we are going to be creating. And at the bottom of that is the Figure 2.2, and that is the set of calculations that we're going to be producing. So that's kind of the plan. So the first thing that we want to do is we want to go ahead and open up our Excel. And when we're in Excel, the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to go down to A1. And in A1, this is on page 70. In A1, we're going to put in the worksheet title and subtitle. So we're going to put in Hypermass online storage. And then in A2, we're going to put in salary report. And then in A3, we're going to put in employee. And then in B3, we're going to put in dependents. And then in C3, we're going to do something totally different. So I'm going to turn off my lights so it's easier to see. So in C3, we are going to only put in the word hourly. So I'm going to blow up my screen a little bit so it's easier to see what I'm doing. We're going to type in the word hours. And then if you're on a Windows machine, you're going to do Alt Enter. And if you're on a Mac, you're going to do Option Enter. And what that's going to do is that is going to make your cursor plop down to the next line. Alt Enter. Or again, on a Mac, Option Enter. And that's going to plop your text down onto the next line. And then on that next line, we're going to type in the words, worked. And then tab to D3. And what that does is that makes it so that hours is on one line and worked is on a second line, but still inside of this one cell. So inside of this one cell, we now have 2 lines worth of text. I had a former colleague who really loved Excel, and she never bothered to learn how to do Microsoft Word. And so the way that she would literally write, not emails, but letters or other documents was to literally in Excel. So she would, instead of saying like, writing a letter and saying, dear so-and-so in Microsoft Word, she would go in and she would go in like A1 and she would say like, dear, Dr. Smith, Alt Enter, Alt Enter, Alt Enter. How are you today? ? Alt Enter, Alt Enter. I am great. I have no idea why she would do this, but that is literally what she would do, and then she would stretch this out so that it would fit, and that is how she would actually write her letters. Instead of using, Microsoft Word, she would use Excel. So one of the things I always like to tell people is that you can use Excel as a word processor. I know because I've had a colleague who's done that, but I think it's a bad idea. I think if you're going to do word processing, you should use Microsoft Word. If you're going to do calculations, you should use Excel, and if you're going to do data, you should use Access. This is going back to what I was saying last time, where use the hammer if you need to hammer in a nail, and not the back end of a screwdriver. But again, the way to go from one piece of line to another is Alt Enter. That will make it go down one line. Or again on a Mac, Option Enter or Return. So anyway, hours worked. Questions? Yes.
How is it different from wrap text?
It is not different from wrap text. It's the same thing as wrapping text. Yeah. All right. So in D3, they want us to do hourly, and then Alt Enter, and then pay rate. Because they want hourly pay rate to go on one line and wrap it on the Y in hourly. And then in E3, they want gross pay. And then federal tax. And then state tax. And then tax percentage. And then net pay. And then finally, hire date.
So my cursor is in this bottom.
The next thing that we're going to do is we're going to enter in the people's names and their dependents and hours worked and hourly pay rate and their hire date. And this is at the bottom of page 71. So we want to put in A4, it's going to be Carl, comma, Michael. And he's got 3 dependents and he worked 60, 45 and 1950. And his hire date was 4/5/10. And then we have Green Sue. And she has 0. And she worked 8150 and 2285 and 7/15/11. And then Sith is 1 dependent, 6950, 1736. Whoops, $17.36, not $1,700.36. Yeah, $17.36. 11309. And then we have Lane John, 26525, 1945, 3/1/2012. Peter Nichols, 125, 1260. Whoops, 1260. And 10/31/08. One has 2 dependents, 5550, 2015, 7/15/09. John Williams has no dependents, worked 80 hours, 2085, 5/14/09. And then once you're done with that, then on page 72, they want us to put in our row titles. Totals and highest and lowest and average. All right, so the next thing that we're going to do is we are going to put in some calculations. Because one of the things that is really great about Excel is that you don't have to, and in fact, you should not enter in most of the data. Mostly, you should use Excel to do the calculations for you. And to do the calculations, we need to put in what the formulas are for those calculations. So that is the that's what we're going to do. And if you look at the bottom of page 73, the bottom of page 73 actually tells us what all of the formulas are that we are going to be doing. Now, the thing that's important to remember about Excel is that anytime that we are entering in data, we just type in the data. So anytime we're entering in information and we're putting in a word, like in A4, we put in Carl, Michael, we just type in Carl, Michael. When we entered in that he has 3 dependents, on B4, we just typed in the number 3. But anytime that we want Excel to do a calculation for us, we need to start that with the equal sign. The equal sign is the way that we tell Excel that we are going to be putting in some sort of formula, some sort of calculation. And so in gross pay, for example, the formula for gross pay is going to be the hours worked times the hourly pay rate. So in order to calculate that, what we need to do is we need to tell Excel that we want to create this calculation. And to create the calculation, we want to type in the equal sign in order to tell it that we wanted to do a calculation. And then we could do one of several things. We could either type in our calculation if we knew what those appropriate cell numbers are. So in this case, it would be the hours worked is what, C4. So I could either type in C4 or I could click on C4. So I could either type in C4 or I could click C4. And then in Excel, to do multiplication, it's the asterisk or shift +8. So I do the asterisk or shift +8, makes the little asterisk icon. And then I want to multiply that by the hourly pay rate. So again, I could either click on a D4 or I could type in D4, either way. And one of the things that's really great about modern iterations of Excel is that you'll notice that it color codes the different cells that are being made up of this formula. So the green is the current formula. The blue is one of the cells, and the red is another cell. And it's indicating then what those cells are. And one of the reasons that it does that is so that you don't accidentally do calculations that you didn't mean to do. So that absolutely is the calculation that I want to do. So I'm going to press enter. Now, one of the things that I could do if I were lame is I could repeat that same calculation because I want to do the same thing for Sue Green. So I would do equals C5 times D5 and I press enter. And then I'd have to do E6 times in E6 I would do equals C6 times D6 and press enter. But there's a much better way of doing it. Anyone guess what the much better way is? The fill handle. So I'm going to go into my gross pay and I'm going to fill handle that down so that I get all of my answers. Now, before I do the federal tax, there is an important concept in mathematics that you need to understand. And it is what is known as the order of operations. And the order of operations is found, the book's explanation of it is found on page 75. But here's how I like to think of this. So suppose I am calculating some numbers. So I have like 42 plus 13 times 10. So what you might think that you would do is you might think that you would add together 42 and 13 and you get 55. And then you multiply 55 by 10 and you get 550. And so you say the answer is 550. And you would be wrong. Because the actual answer is 172. Why is the answer 172, you ask? Because of the order of operations. So in mathematics, the first thing that you have to do is in the order of operations, the first thing that what you do is you, first of all, check to see if you are negating something, making it become a negative or positive number. Then you do percentages. Then you do exponentials. Then you do multiplication, and then division, and then addition and subtraction. So because of the order of operations, the first thing that I need to do in this equation is the multiplication part of it. So I would need to do 13 times 10. I get 130. And then I could add in 42 and I get 172. So the order of operations is really, 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 really important. And if what I really wanted was to get 550, I would need to tell Excel that that's how I wanted to do it. And the way that I would do that is I would surround 42 and 13 with parentheses. If there are parentheses, those calculations happen before other calculations happen. Now, those also follow the orders of operation. So if there are orders of operation inside of the parentheses, then multiplication takes precedence over addition and subtraction. So if there's multiplication inside of the paren, I would need to do that part of it too, and I might actually need to have a paren inside of a paren inside of a paren if I really wanted to be certain that my calculations added up correctly. So I love math, and I do this all the time, but I still sometimes forget the order of operations, or rather, I don't really forget it, but I don't think about it. So anytime that personally I am doing any kind of calculation, I will overuse parentheses. I'll put in parentheses where I don't really need to do parentheses. And the reason that I do that is because I want to make sure that Excel calculates things the way that I meant Excel to calculate them. So I would encourage you to overuse parentheses. Use parentheses all the time because it's better to do that than to accidentally come up with 172 when you mean to come up with 550. Or vice versa. You know, in the case of what we're doing in class, of course, you know, it's not going to matter. But in the case of like real life, it might be the, you know, difference between whether or not you get paid correctly or not, or that somebody else gets paid correctly or not, or, you know, you get enough food or whatever it is. So that's why it's important to understand what's really going on. Yes.
It's giving me a different answer when I do this equal sign.
What answer are you getting?
It's a year.
Okay, so then that means that it is thinking that it was a year. So we'll talk about dates later on, but all right. So if you're typing something else, I want you to stop and go to F4. Because F4 is where we are going to calculate the federal tax. So even if you have wrong things and everything else, I want you to make sure that you got the federal tax correct. Because this is really important. Well, I mean, it's not important, but it's important for this assignment. So the calculation for federal tax is going to be 0.22 times the quantity of the gross pay minus the dependents times 24.32. So in order to do this, what we need to do in our federal tax is that we need to do an equal sign. And we need to say 0.22. And then we need to multiply that. And then we need to multiply that by the quantity. So we need to put in an open parentheses. And then we need to put in our gross pay. So where's our gross pay? E4 minus the dependents, which is, so B4. and then multiply that by 24.32. So what this is really doing is this is really doing the quantity of the E4 minus the quantity of B4 times 24.32. So it's really doing this. Because that's what the federal government gives us as what the amount is. And so when I press enter, I should get $243.28, basically. So again, the equation is going to be 0.22 times E4 minus B4 times 24.32. And that's what the federal tax is. Because the way the federal tax is determined is it's determined partially based on how many dependents you have. And the number of dependents you have gets multiplied by 24.32. And then you take that number and you subtract it from the from your gross pay, and then you multiply that total amount by 0.22, and that is the federal tax. So if you have a lot of kids, you'll go down to, $0 in federal tax. Now, because I don't want to keep typing that same thing over and over and over again, I'm just going to fill handle it down. All right, sales tax. So the sales tax is 0.04 times the gross pay. So I do 0.04 times E4. Oops, equals 0.04. And then I'm going to fill handle that all the way down.
That's what I was saying. How come you're just showing the form?
So anytime that you want to view your equations, you can, so the keyboard shortcut is control accent. The accent is the one that is next to the number 1 key. Or you can go on formulas and then you can click on to show formulas. Or again, control accent brings it, I do control accent because I prefer to do keyboard shortcuts whenever possible. Control accent, so where it's the one that's like the, if I were to do shift accent, I would get the tilde, a little squiggly thingy. The squiggly thingy above the N in an enye. the tilde. So control accent will toggle between show formulas and hide formulas. Or again, you can go there by clicking onto the formulas tab and then clicking on to show formulas, does the same thing. All right, tax percentage. So tax percentage is, again, I'm going to need to put in parentheses. So this is really important that you need to remember to do parentheses, and I'll talk about that in a second why. But it is going to be the quantity of federal tax. So I do open parenthesis equals open parentheses federal tax, which is F4 plus the sales tax, which is G4, close parentheses, divided by the gross pay, which is E4. So the reason that you need to put in the parentheses around F4 and G4 is that if you don't, it will be F4 plus and then just G4 divided by E4. And not F4 divided by E4 plus G4 divided by E4, which is what we really want. That's why we need to put F4 plus G4 in parentheses as an order of operations. Because again, we do multiplication and division first. So without the parentheses, it would be the same thing as saying G4 divided by E4 plus F4. That's not what we want. We want it to be F4 divided by E4 plus G4 divided by E4. We want those both to be divided by E4. I'm sorry? You are going to remember this because you are going to put parentheses around absolutely everything that you ever want to add, multiply, divide, or whatever, so that you don't have to remember it. Anytime that you are dividing or multiplying anything, put parentheses around the thingy that you are multiplying or dividing it by. Always. Even if you don't need it.
So it will multiply F4 and E4 plus G4 and E4.
Well, in this equation, we're adding F4 and G4 together, and then we're dividing by E4.
No.
Without it, we would be only dividing G4 by E4 and then adding F4. And that's not what we want.
It's solving the inside part and then.
Exactly. So the trick is overuse parentheses. Even if you don't need it, use it. That is my strong suggestion. Because otherwise it causes problems. So again, the equation is equals F4, quantity of F4 plus G4 divided by E4. So we got 0.24638 down to 26% for this guy and 24.3% for this guy and so on. All right, let's see here. All right, and then the net pay is going to be the gross pay minus the federal tax minus the sales tax. So there are a couple of ways that you could do this. You could do it the way the book tells you to do it, or you could do it the way that I would normally do it. So the way that I would normally do it is I would normally say the gross pay minus the federal tax minus the sales tax, because that's the way I normally think about it. But the way the book is telling us to do it is they're saying make it be the gross pay minus the quantity of the tax plus the tax. Because again, when you are doing order of operations, you do negation first, and then you do addition and stuff after. So what it's going to do is it's going to put in the negation on here, and that's going to cause us, when we subtract this number, going to subtract the, these two things added together. It's going to be subtracted from E4. It's going to be the same answer. It's E4 minus the quantity of F4 plus G4 is the same thing as E4 minus F4 minus G4. Those mean the same thing. And we got, in this case, 888. That's okay. Yours will as well. It's because of my width of my screen. The same issue that we had last time. Mm-hmm. So again, on my total, how everything should look in terms of my calculations, these are all of the formulas that I used to get my answers.
So if somebody has shared their Excel document with me, I can click on show formula and I would be able to see it.
Yep, if somebody shares their spreadsheet with you and they used formulas to create the data, you can go on formulas, show formulas, and see the formulas. Or you could do, again, control accent. And on a Mac, it also is control accent. It's the same exact. It's not like option control or something. It really is control accent. All right. Questions so far? Okay, so the next thing that I want to do is I want to go in and calculate the totals. So to calculate the totals, I'm going to use the auto sum to calculate the totals. So again, like I said last time, you can either use the auto sum or you can do equals SUM, open parentheses, and select the area that you want to do the sum on. So if I go to totals, so I'm going to go to C13. And in C13, I'm going to click onto my auto sum. And it's going to say equal sum of C4 to C12. I'm going to press enter. And it's going to get that there are 598.1 hours total worked. And if I go into gross pay and I wanted to get the auto sum on the gross pay, I could get the auto sum on the gross pay. And we get 500 or 11,515. If I do the sum on the federal tax, I get the federal tax. And you'll notice that by doing the gross pay and the federal tax, it autofills the rest of it. It autofills the, by doing gross pay, the sales tax automatically gets created. By doing both the gross pay and the federal tax, I get the tax percentage as well. By doing the auto sum. Because the tax percentage is built based on F12 plus G12 divided by E12. Well, if F12 is already created and E12 is already created, then H12 will automatically get created. Similarly on, on 13, do the same thing. It's because they are being based on, so by putting in a data in E13, it's also putting in data on G13. So the book on page 81, the book tells us that they want us to copy the formula from H12 to H13. And I've never fully understood why they want us to do that, because, I mean, the tax percentage is based off the totals, not the sum, which is true, but copying it from H13 means, H12 means that we would be copying Jin Yao's and not like the totals. So I would either leave it blank or I would keep it as is. I don't understand why the book is telling you to do the thing on page 81. So I'm going to ignore what the book says on page 81 completely, because that really is not correct. So I'm going to keep it as is at 25%, because that actually is the total average. So anyway, the next thing that they want us to do is they want us to figure out what are the highest, the lowest, and the average of the various different fields. So there is no such formula as highest, and there isn't a lowest, but there is a max and there is a min. And so that's actually what the formula is called. Now, one of the things to know about Excel is that if you don't remember which formula you want to use, the first thing that you can do is you can click onto the little arrow to the right of the formula guy, the sigma symbol, and you can see if any of those are the things that you want. And if they are, great. And if they're not, you can click on more functions. And when you click on more functions, it brings up the insert function screen. And in the insert function screen, it actually does a pretty good job of helping you figure out what formula you might want to use, or what function you might want to use, I mean. So if I couldn't remember that it's called minimum or maximum, but I want to find out like the largest number, I might type in something like, I don't know, largest number, and click go. And it will show me all of the things that have the word largest number in it. So it's not large array, max A. This is pretty close to maybe what I want. It does not ignore logical values in text. So this, so the difference between max and max A is that max A would also include text that had numbers in it. So if I had like, FOO32, it would treat that as 32 instead of just 32. Arabic converts Roman numerals to Arabic. That might be useful if I needed to have, if I wanted to do that. Dmax, lookup, but here's max. The point is that that you can type in and search for functions if you don't remember what the name of the function is. You can also click onto the drop-down menu and choose from the recommended list all of the various different types of things that you can do. So if I'm doing mathematical stuff, I could click on a math and trig, and it would show me all of the mathematical things. If I go into statistical, it shows me all the statistical things. If I go into lookup and reference, or text, or logical if-then statements. So there are there's lots of help that's built into Excel that I think is really useful. The other thing is that if I don't want to go that route to get to it by doing sigma and then more functions, I can also get there by clicking onto the FX button. And the FX button brings up the same thing. Now in this case, the one that we want is actually inside of the sigma, and it is in fact max. So if I do max, it's going to plop up with the largest number. And if I fill handle this all the way across, it will give us the largest answer on all of them. Similarly, if I want the lowest, it's equals min. Or I could click on a min and select the range that I want the minimum to be. I want it to be B12. And the min going across. And then the average is called average. And again, average is right there. So I do average, and I want the average of these. I can drag the average across. You can either select them manually, or you can use the fill handle to fill handle them across. Now let's see here. The things they want us to not include are the average tax percent. They don't want us to do the average tax percent, so I'm going to delete that one. And I think that's it. I think that's the only one that I want to delete. Yeah. One of the things that you can do to check to see if you have your data entered correctly is, again, I could show all my formulas and make sure that I have my formulas in there. But another thing that I could do is that if I click onto a particular cell and then I double click it, it will do what's known as the range finder. And what the rangefinder does is the rangefinder shows you all of the things that are being used. So again, 0.22 times blue. Well, blue is E6, that's the right thing. Minus the quantity, and the quantity in red is B6, and the red guy is B6, times 24.32, so that's correct. I'm sorry? H16. Yeah, because I deleted it. Yeah, because the average tax percentage, I guess they don't want us to calculate the average tax percentage. I don't know why they don't want us to calculate the average tax percentage, but whatever. They don't want us to, so that's fine. We don't need to do that. Mhm. So what's wrong? So check here. You have the minimum maximum, right? So for which page? So which one is yours not matching?
The average is 66 minus 60. I'm sure there must be something.
Yeah, so check your hours worked. So it should be 60, 45, 81.5, 69.5, 65.25, 71.25. There you go. All right. So at this point, I am going to save my workbook, and so I'm going to save this in my Mark Random Way Cool Awesome Spiffy CA100D folder, and I am going to call this. This is the Mark Branham. This is the hyper mass. What is this called? The hypermass salary report. All right. At this point, if you are typing something, I want you to stop. And if you haven't yet saved, save. Because I'm going to do something completely different. And the thing that I'm going to do completely different is I want to talk about fun with dates. Because as important as this stuff is, there are some more important stuff that I think I want to tell you about. So in column J, you may have noticed that when we typed in the dates, so we typed in 4/5/10 and it translated to 4/5/2010. That's because in Excel, whenever you put in a date, it figures out that you're probably putting in a date. And the way to change how a date looks is there are several ways, but in your number area, there's a little drop-down menu that allows you to choose short date, long date, time. If I click on more formats, I can go in and choose the specific style of date that I might want it to be, and so on. Here's the thing about dates. Dates are not what you think they are. You may think that today is July the 2nd of 2019. As far as Excel is concerned, you would be wrong. So the first thing I want to show you, so I'm going to save this, and I'm going to open up a brand new spreadsheet. And the brand new spreadsheet that I'm going to show you is, and by the way, all of this is in your Canvas. So if I open up Canvas, oops, I already have Canvas open. Did I? No, I guess maybe I closed it. All right, so if I go into my Canvas, all of this is in Canvas in our class assignments, or not our assignments, I mean our class section. So if I go in and I go into courses and I go down to CA 100 and I go into pages, in pages, all of this is in the unit that I call using Excel to calculate someone's or something's date. So everything that, everything I'm going to tell you is all in here. So the first thing that I'm going to tell you is that if you want to figure out what today's date is, there is a special command called equals today. So I'm going to say, what is today's, I'll just say today's date equals today, open, close, paren. That is how you do, in Excel. So if I go into like B1 and I say equals today, open and close paren, and press enter, it looks like it says 7/2/2019. There's another way to do dates, and that is with date and time. It is equals now. So if I do equals now, it looks like it is July 2, 2019 at 7:47 p.m. Here's what it really is. So if I go into the number section and I go down to general, because general converts it to text, the current date and time is actually 43,648.82499 days after January 1st, 1900. In Excel, every single date is determined not by the date, but by how many days it's been since January 1st, 1900. Or to be more precise, 11:59 p.m. and 59.9999999999999 or infinity seconds after in December 31st, 1899. That is the official time in Excel. Yes.
Why is 1900 not 18?
Why is it 1900 and not 1800? Because when Excel was first created, it actually wasn't 1900. When Excel was first created, it was created on a Mac. And back in 1984, the Mac could not understand dates that started before 1904. So one of the issues that exists in Excel is that there are actually two competing different methods of determining dates. One is called the 1900 method, and the other is called the 1904 method. Now, the good news is that almost all modern spreadsheets use the 1900 method. But there are a handful of really old spreadsheets that you might come across that is still using the 1904 method. How do you know that you're using the 1904 method, you ask? By clicking on to File and going down to Options, and then in Options, going to Advanced, and then scrolling down and ticking the box called use the 1904 date method. Let's see, where is it? When calculating, it says here it is. When calculating this workbook, use the 1904 date system. Never, ever, 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 ever tick that box. Because unless you are using a Mac from 1993 or something like that, you don't want to use the 1904 date system. That said, if you ever come across a spreadsheet and all of the dates seem to be off by about 4 years, almost certainly the original spreadsheet was created on a Mac using an older version of Excel, and because of that, it was done using the 1904 date system. And so you might just need to remember this, or perhaps you will think of something about the 1904 date system or something, and that's the only reason I tell you this. I've been playing around with Excel for, well, since 1984, so what is it, 30 some odd years. I come across this about once every 4 or 5 years. I will come across a really old spreadsheet and the dates seem off by like 4 years, and I'll look at it and say, why are all of these functions, why is this function so, oh yeah, 1904 date system. That's what it is. So the reason that it's not 1800 is because the Mac couldn't even understand 1900, let alone 1800. And when Windows ported it over, they just chose 1900. Just the way it is.
So in your files, you could click on this. And
you could, and then everything will be off. And in fact, I'll do it. I'll tick the box. Don't do this. I'm going to tick the box. I'm going to click OK. It's going to say today, but you'll notice that it changed what the, up here, it still says today, but down here, it now says that, and I'll just write it down over here, 186 is what it was, and then I'll go back and convert it back to the way that we do it in modern way. I'll scroll down, use the 1904 date system, unchecked, click OK. So in the 1904 date system, today is 42-186. In the modern way, it is 43-648. This in modern times is, if I convert this to date, is July 1st, 2015, which is about 4 years off. So like I said, if you come across a spreadsheet and all of the dates seem to be off by about 4 years, it's because they created it on a Mac and they were using the 1904 date system. All right. So that's one thing that is, not that neat about Excel, but it's neat to know about. Here's what's really neat. So suppose I put in, now that you know that dates are just numbers, it means that you can do things with dates like you can do things with any other number. So if I have, for example, a special date, so I'll say my special date is, say, November 14th, 1971. Anyone guess why November 14th might be a particularly special date? It's my birthday. So let's see how many days old I am. So days old is going to be equals B5 minus today's date. I am currently 17th, or I guess I want to go the other way around, right? I actually want to do equals today minus the special date. So I'm currently 17,397 days old, which means that in 3 days, on the 5th of July, I am going to be 17,400 days. Now, that's pretty cool, but let me show you an even cooler one, and that is that my mom is 7/5/1946, which means that she is currently 26,660 days old. Her birthday is on, day after tomorrow, or day after tomorrow, I mean. But that also means that on Monday, she is going to be 26,666 days old. So I'm going to make sure that I celebrate her 266666 birthday. Another really cool one is that my daughter's birthday is 4/15/2005, which means that she is currently 5,191 days old, which means that I could figure out, when was she 5,000 days old? Well, to do that, I'd say equals the special date plus 5,000, and we get that on the day before Christmas last year, it was indeed her 5,000th day birthday. So guess what I celebrated on Christmas Eve last year? Caitlin's 5,000th day birthday. So how did I do that? That's the question. How did I do that? I added 5,000 to her birthday. So you can calculate anything with dates like this. So if I want to know, how many days has it been since, I don't know, anything? If I wanted to know, if the building was built on, say, September 4th, I don't know, 2010, that means that it is currently 3,223 days old.
So let's say we have to find out from that day to 6,000 days.
Then you would add 6,000 to it. So I would say equals this plus 6,000.
Would be.
Mm-hmm.
So now.
So if I want to know when is my daughter going to be 6,000 days old, I could say 4/15/2005. She will be in 2021 will be when she turns 6,000 days old. So that's kind of fun. Another kind of fun one is to find out how many years old something is. So to find out how many years old something is, it is equals year frac and then date 1, date 2. So I would say equals, and then I would do year frac for year fraction. And then the date 1, which would be, her birthday, today's date, close paren. She's currently 14.21 years old. The only problem with doing this, so by saying equals her days old divided by 365, is that 365 isn't actually how many days there are in a year. It's really 365.25. But even that's not totally accurate, because there are, it's actually not 0.25, because there are leap years that happen every 25th leap year. So that means, so the year 2000, for example, was not a leap year, even though it's divisible by 4. So it's actually something like 0.2493 something, something, something. And that's why if you do by 0.25, it doesn't actually accurately come out the full amount. It's just pretty close, but not totally close. If I do my birthday, it's even more off because it's off by by almost a third because of 2010. Anybody who was born after 2010 is going to have a much larger error than people who were born after 2010. Because 2000. Because Y2K was divisible both by 4 and 25, and therefore was not a leap year. So anyway, fun with dates. And like I said, all of these are found in using Excel to calculate someone or something's date. So equals today, today's date, equals now, today's date and time, year frac, can subtract. If I want to find out yesterday, it's equals today minus 1. Tomorrow is equals today plus 1. If I want to know what next week is going to be, what do you suppose I would do? Well, so equals today gives me today. So what's next week? Plus 7. Equals today plus 7 gives you next week. Or when I did this, I was 16,558. All right, so like I said, dates are pretty fun. I did have one more thing I wanted to show you, and that is to create pop-up, and then we'll take a little break. So if I wanted to create a little pop-up message that popped up right here, the way that you do that is it is in when you are in so you go to the field where, the cell where you want the pop-up message to happen, and then click on data and then data validation. And when you do data validation, where it says input message, you can put in a title. And the title will show up then in bold, and your message will show up in normal text. So in here, I might say, I don't know, getting today's date to calculate today's date, use the formula equals today, open and close paren, to calculate today, date and time, use the formula equals now. Something like that. And then what that's going to do is when I get into A1, I get this little pop-up message.
So what kind of situations would you use it?
Anytime that you are creating a spreadsheet that you are sending to somebody else and you want to put in instructions, that would be when you would use the pop-up. So again, to get to the pop-up, it's in data and then data validation and then input message. And again, it's also in your pages in a page called Create Pop-Up Text in Excel. And in Create Pop-Up Text in Excel, it tells you again how to do it. Whatever you put in the title will show up in bold. Whatever you put in the input message will be in normal text. Any questions about fun with dates or about formulas or about anything that we've done so far today? All right, I think it's time to take a little bit of a break. When we come back from the break, we're going to go back to our hypermass salary guy and make it look pretty, because right at the moment it looks boring. So we're going to make it look pretty. So that's going to be what we'll do when we come back from the break. But like I said, let's take about a 10-minute break, come back around 8:15 or thereabouts, and we'll continue on.